Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas, and you're watching Empire Building. So I've been meaning to get to this video for quite some time now, ever since Mara announced that it would be working with DMG Blockchain to form the Digital Currency Miners of North America, or DCMNA. I did a video of it at the time, but then I received quite a few comments of people frankly terrified that this would somehow lead to Mara's demise. And this is very important to understand, especially if the technology itself is something that you believe in. But as with many things in this space, the answer is never quite as clear-cut. A little over a week ago, I received this comment from Dr. Knows, who was an early subscriber to the channel once I started covering these topics. Good day for us with Mara. Curtis, I have a concern regarding the Mara-DMG tie-up. Yesterday, after watching this video, I was never more bullish on Mara. Then I asked a friend that bought Mara and Riot below $2 each, as you did. He knows a ton about crypto, and he did not like this deal due to censorship in the mining pool. Does he raise legit concerns? Here are some of his quotes with regard to the Mara deal. If you are a supporter of Bitcoin, Mara is ethically bankrupt. Read up on their deal with OFAC. It will render them broke, actually. You think I am shitting you? I am not. Read the up on what you invest in, because it will destroy Mara overnight. Think about what you are supporting very seriously, because it will bankrupt you, morally and financially. They are going to discard blocks with any OFAC flagged addresses. Unless you have 51% of mining capacity, they don't, they will be rejected from mining pool, making all of their CapEx and OpEx worth $0. Now that is a stern warning. I wish I knew enough to challenge him. Certainly scared the crap out of me since I have a huge long position on Mara. Are his concerns legit? Thanks so much, Curtis. Really appreciate any feedback on this. Much appreciated. Now, I really wanted to answer this question much sooner than this, but the news in this space has been moving rapidly, and this just kept getting pushed down the list. But we're dealing with it today. So there is a lot to unpack here. Are his concerns legit? Yeah. Is it going to render Mara bankrupt? Hell no. The anger from this individual is very much understandable, and I'm not at all surprised by it. If you haven't been in this space very long, then you may not be aware of the mindset of many of the original Bitcoin believers. You have to realize that Bitcoin was born out of the cyberpunk movement. This was a group with a very healthy distrust of government and any centralized authority. Satoshi Nakamoto was a member of this group. And what Bitcoin provided us was a means of escaping centralized control from governments and large financial institutions and reclaiming that control for the general public so that they could transact with each other anywhere in the world without government or any other centralized authority from getting in the way and censoring those transactions. This is where the term censorship resistance comes from, which is a pillar of this technology. The ability to transact at will without anybody being able to stop it. But Bitcoin has come a very long way since then, and the institutions have begun to take notice, and they want in, but they are still subject to the laws and regulations under the jurisdictions in which they operate. This introduces a conundrum of sorts. Bitcoin is open sourced, borderless, and without rulers. So if you are a public company working within the confines of the United States, subject to the laws of the United States, what are you to say to regulators and lawmakers if it's found that one of the blocks that Mara or any other publicly traded blockchain company mines, if one of those blocks contains a transaction funding terrorist organizations? Putting aside the reality that those organizations have had no trouble keeping themselves well funded all this time, long before Bitcoin ever turned up. It's well known that every single major banking organization in the entire world is guilty of laundering money for these organizations. I'm not going to get into that because that's a whole rabbit hole on its own and not what I'm here to answer. So all that is to communicate that One of the founding principles of Bitcoin's core technology is to allow anyone to transact with anybody without anybody being able to stop that from happening. So what did Mara do? Mara is partnering with DMG Blockchain to create this brand new mining pool centered in the United States that would allow publicly traded companies to join their mining power together to mine in a pool that would provide them with increased transparency, potentially higher profits due to lower fees, and also allows them to abide by more of the regulations that are imposed on them through the jurisdiction in which they operate, in this case being the United States of America. This is what Mara said during its press release. Using DMG's proprietary patent-pending technologies, the pool will also create transaction blocks that specifically omit any transactions deemed risky by wallet score, which may not meet OFAC standards. As a result, North American miners who are DCMNA members will reduce the risk of blocks they mine containing transactions tied to criminal or terrorist-related activities. So yes, this does go against the core principles that Bitcoin was created for in the first place. But it's also understandable that these companies may want to protect themselves from inadvertently facilitating a transaction for a terrorist organization. But this is where we come to the part of the comment that doesn't quite align itself with how Bitcoin works in the first place. They are going to discard blocks with any OFAC flagged addresses. No, they are not going to discard blocks with these flagged addresses or transactions. They are simply not going to include those transactions in the blocks in which they mine. Those transactions would remain in the transaction pool for the next block that's mined, whoever that might be. In other words, that transaction would just remain in the queue until some other miner includes it in the blockchain and collects the fee for that transaction. Unverified transactions can remain in the pool for days before finally being included. This happens all the time, especially when there's high demand on the network, as we've seen lately. Transactions that don't include a high enough fee will get left behind until the number of transactions in the queue are reduced to a point where it becomes economical for a miner to include that transaction in the block that they mine. So the reality is miners are always choosing which transactions they want to include and which transactions they don't want to include. This is normally built off the incentive structure. They'll simply take all the transactions with the highest fees and include those first. It's not a first come, first served basis. If you have a very large transaction that you want to get approved quickly, as the person conducting the transaction, you simply include a larger fee associated with your transaction. That will make it more attractive to miners and encourage them to include it in the transactions quicker. So no, Mara is not discarding blocks. They cannot do that. And it would make no sense for them to do that. The next thing he says is, unless you have 51% of the mining capacity, they don't. They will be rejected from mining pool, making all their CapEx and OpEx worth $0. So what this person is suggesting is that if they were to try to discard blocks, which they're not, if they did attempt to do that, then the mining pool that they would be operating in, which in this case is now their own, would discard them from the pool. Again, this doesn't make any sense. So this is where I know a lot of the terminology can be very confusing, and unless you spent a great deal of time researching and understanding this yourself, or even perhaps mining on your own, some of the information out there can be very misleading. What Mara and DMG are attempting to do here is shield themselves from inadvertently participating in financing terrorist and criminal activity, something that the Bitcoin blockchain does not discriminate against. As far as Bitcoin is concerned, there is no such thing as an ethical transaction or an unethical transaction. It doesn't make any such distinction. The only thing Bitcoin sees is valid transaction or invalid transaction. Outside of that, it is a free and open marketplace. And while I do agree that Bitcoin's core principle was to provide censorship resistance, I am not surprised to see that now that these institutions are beginning to enter this space, they are trying to impose their own will on this technology. We all knew this was coming. Andreas Antonopoulos spoke of this time and time and time again. Having said that, I personally don't have any serious misgivings about any of these public companies attempting to shield themselves from this kind of liability. In fact, I'm okay with it. The last thing we need as investors is for one of these companies to be targeted by U.S. officials or any other jurisdiction for inadvertently participating in such a transaction that they deem unlawful. It will in no way lead to these companies going bankrupt somehow or getting kicked off the blockchain. Nobody can kick them off the blockchain. Again, that's one of the pillars of Bitcoin's technology. It is permissionless. And if Mara and the DMC or any other publicly traded company decides to separate themselves from other mining pools and abide by their own set of rules by building a wall around themselves so that they could mine within a protected sphere, it's not like they're somehow going to gain 51% of all the available hash power in the world within this pool. In fact, they're already setting themselves up to not be able to do that because this pool requires KYC. So not just anybody can join it. In fact, they will most likely reject anyone that they are unable to verify. But none of this will have any negative financial impact on these companies. And it also will have no lasting impact on the censorship resistance of the Bitcoin network. They are operating within the confines of the protocol of Bitcoin. Just because the transaction is valid does not mean they are required to include it in their block. They can leave it in the pool and let someone else verify it. They certainly cannot stop that transaction from going through. It is fascinating to see how this space is evolving now that a more diversified group of participants are beginning to join in. Not everyone who uses Bitcoin will share or agree with its founding principles. But that doesn't mean they can't use it and attempt to impose their own belief or will on the network. That's part of the beauty of this technology. Everybody gets a say, but it doesn't mean that everybody has to play by the same rules that any one participant thinks we should all play by. This is true open democracy. And over time, Bitcoin will continue to evolve as more and more people begin to impose their own will on this platform. And they can all do that without permission. And then the public will decide for themselves whether or not they think those beliefs align with their own. And they will vote with their hash power or with their support, with their own Bitcoin, with their nodes. The point is, this will continue to grow. And no one will ever fully agree on what should happen with this technology. Yet, it will continue. And no matter what values any individual or group tries to impose on the system, everybody gets a say because there are no leaders. It's not a pyramid. Literally everyone is equal in the eyes of Bitcoin, and it will always be indifferent. No, Mara's not going bankrupt. And no, they're not getting kicked out of the mining pool. And yes, they don't have to include transactions if they don't want to. Miners do it all day, every day, usually for financial reasons. There is no difference between excluding a transaction based on inadequate transaction fee proposals than there is for excluding a transaction for any other reason. It'll simply wait in the pool until the next miner comes along. I really love this question because it helps to really outline exactly how mining works and how crucial and vital it is to the overall health of the Bitcoin network. Miners both work against each other in the fight to acquire the most Bitcoin, but also cooperatively to support the network. They don't have to agree on anything but the protocol. It's one of the things that makes this technology so elegant, beautiful, and mind-blowing. We've never seen anything like this before. I think the DCMNA is the first of many that we will probably see to this effect. And who knows, if, say, 99% of all the available mining pools out there choose to adopt this policy, then yes, Bitcoin will lose that censorship resistance. But this is an adaptive technology. And someone else will come along with some way to avert these processes. Maybe that's on Bitcoin itself, or maybe that's on some other alternative blockchain, or some kind of second layer solution. That's the thing about open source technologies. Anybody can build anything and impart their own will, but everyone's equal. So it's up to the community to decide what will become truth. But that's all for this one. Now let's get back to empire building.